This should be fun. It's going to be a good build with no problems. Oh yeah, time to build a Stompy. Bandai's ATST has to be one of the best kits I think that anybody can build. I've built one of these before and I had an absolute blast with it. Because it's Bandai, there's no problem with fit at all. The detail is great. Because it's Star Wars, it's just really cool. And I mean, this thing just looks great. And the design is just so cool and so iconic. So this is a really fun build that I'm looking forward to. And if you've never built one of these, I don't care what genre you build, I think anyone would enjoy this build. And it can be built by a kid or by a very advanced modeler, and there's plenty to offer for everybody in between. Now the kit comes with a full interior, so this video is going to focus on painting and weathering the interior, and then later episodes will cover painting it, including I'm going to be using my airbrush to achieve a streaked finish, kind of like what you would do with dot filters, but I'm going to show how you can do it with an airbrush. And then the weathering will be the third video, but the interior is going to be the focus of this one. Now the interior just consists of 5 parts. There's some highly detailed side walls, there's this back wall, there's the front instrument panel that mounts into the front armor plating, and then there's this seating area with this little deck for the commander to stand on. Now it comes with a couple of driver figures, but in my opinion they're awful. For as good as Bandai does with details like this, they kind of drop the ball with this. Their faces look okay, but the rest of them, they're just so stiff, and when you put them in there, they both look like they're just, you know, like they're chanting something. They're sitting there going, one of us. So I won't be using those. They also provide a Chewbacca figure that you can have standing up out of the, that will stand up out of the hatch. But again, he's not a great sculpt, and there's something about that hair that they, I know it's hard to cast fur, but it just looks like he's from, a 70s rock band rather than a 70s movie, so I won't be using him either. Now I did make a slight modification to the kit to account for not using the figures. The seats have little notches that fit into the figure's back like that, and I just took a knife and a combination of a knife and some small sanding sticks and just smooth that out, got those notches out of there. There was also a slot for that Chewbacca's foot would notch into, and I didn't want that there, so I started to fill it with putty. And then I thought, wait a minute, why don't I do something that's a little more creative than that? So I made a little hatch to go over it, put a little hinge looking thing right there and a handle right there, so it'll just be a nice little detail there that'll be able to do some chipping and so forth later on. But everything else is out of the box, and I've primed it and it's ready for paint. I'm going to start off base coating all the interior parts with Vallejo neutral gray. I'll just thin this down with water. I'm just going to roughly paint this in with an initial coat, and then I'll go in with one more coat to make sure I get complete coverage. Alright, with everything painted neutral gray, I'm going to go in and use a 50-50 mix of neutral gray and sky gray and just paint in any of the little raised details, anything that just stands out from another surface. This not only gives some variety to the color, but it also helps distinguish I guess you'd say the volumes, the things that are projected up that are at a different level than whatever it's sitting on, or to help make it distinct from something in the background. I use Vallejo German gray to paint the seat pads. The Empire had a dizzying array of grays that they used inside their vehicles. I use a mix of 2 parts Luftwaffe uniform World War II and 1 part neutral gray to paint these little diamond shapes here, just to give them some separation, a slightly different gray. And it's also a pretty passable TIE fighter color, so it's kind of alluding to other parts of the universe in a subtle way. Now I'm going to undercoat all the little knobs and buttons and switches throughout the interior with Vallejo Sky Gray. I'm going to later paint these red, or some of them, and while red will just about leave traces of itself on any color you touch it to, it doesn't have a lot of opacity. So by undercoating this in something that's fairly close to white, the red will be a little brighter. If you don't want your red as bright, then give it a darker undercoating. Now once again, using the Vallejo Sky Gray, I'm going to do a light dry brush to pick up edges and details and things like that. And if it provides a little streaking on the open areas, that's fine. That helps contribute to a weathered look. Now I've worked almost all of the paint off of this, so I may do 2 or 3 rounds of dry brushing. Using less paint instead of more paint will help you build up the effect and achieve what you're looking for. Usually the only issue people ever have with dry brushing is too much paint. So if you get the result you're not looking for, get a little paint off the brush, work it off on a paper towel or a piece of plastic, and keep going. Now on either side wall there are these little oval screen looking things, and then there's a couple of computer screen looking things right there on the instrument panel. I'm going to base these with Citadel's Warpstone Glow. And I've thinned down some Citadel Moot Green, and I've got just a bare little bit on my brush. And I'm just going to stipple some of this on around the panel just to make it look like it's kind of, staticky, active. Something's going on it. It's not just a flat, dead color. I want to add some shading to deepen the depth a little bit. Now, I could use enamels for this, or oils, but they're going to take quite a while to dry. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this Citadel Known Oil, which is acrylic. And it's not something that you put on and wipe off. You put it on and it's just there. So what I'm going to do is in some areas I'm just going to paint over it like this, which is going to fill in those recesses. And it's going to darken the flat surfaces. But what I can do is if there's any that just collects, I can just use my brush and wick it off. And then in areas that I don't want to just completely paint over, I'll just very carefully go in like that and just kind of line it in like that. Now I'm going to do later weathering, so the weathering will cover up some of the tide marks. But if I think a tide mark is too egregious, to use a $64 word, then what I can do is just go back in with some of the original paint that I painted over whatever that element is and just neaten it up a bit. It will take a little longer than applying an enamel wash or an oil wash, but the benefit is that once I finish doing this, because this will only take me, for the whole cockpit, will only take me about 25-30 minutes. Once I finish doing it, it's dry and I can continue on. So if ease of cleanup is something that you're more concerned about, then you might want to opt for enamels or oils. But if speed is your thing, then definitely a wash that's acrylic, like this Citadel Known Oil, or others like that would be the perfect solution. I thought it might look good to take some Coelia green shade from Citadel, just drop it down into these viewports here, or whatever they are. Get it in there real good, then wipe off my brush and just wick up the excess. And it'll leave a nice kind of dark edge around that to enhance the lighter colors in the middle. That'll dry flat, so I can later come back and put some gloss coat over that if I want to keep it looking electronic-like. In a photo that I found on the Googles, I noticed that these little square things had an orange color in the middle. So I'm going to paint that in using Citadel Fire Dragon Bright. Now I'm going to imagine these 4 little things here as some kind of interior lighting for the cockpit, which I guess would be the interior. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to paint these with some Vallejo yellow-green just to give them a bit of a glowy effect. I'm going to let it just kind of spill out. I thinned it fairly heavily with water. I'm going to let it kind of spill out just a little around the edges to maybe give it just a hint of a glow effect. Now there are loads of little buttons and dials and switches around the interior. So I'm going to paint some of them with this Vallejo Game Color Gory Red. Some I'll leave with the sky gray color on it that's the base. I'll use Citadel's Evil Sun's Scarlet to paint a few of the other buttons, just to make them look like that they're perhaps active and glowing. Alright, that's the base painting done, and this is my take on how it would look. You may do yours more colorful, you may do yours less colorful, you may choose different colors. I think that's the fun of doing something like this, is you kind of get to imagine what you want it to be. It can be based on movie props and things like that, or you can take some artistic license and do what you think is best. Now that everything's base painted though, I'm going to start dirtying this up a bit. Now to suggest chipping, I'm going to use this very small makeup brush, and I'm just going to use some Vallejo German Gray and just kind of use it to, I'm not dry brushing, I'm dabbing onto the edge until I can build up like a splotch like that. So some areas are going to be just kind of a gray edge, and others are going to be the bigger splotch like that. Now the paint dries up fairly quick, so you have to reload your brush a lot. But the other thing I do is just go into the middle of the panel. Let me reload my brush. And just directly put in some abrasions like that. And this is just kind of like using a sponge. It's just a more controlled method because of the smaller size of the brush. But I'll just do this across the interior until I get it built up to the level of chipping that I want. Okay, I just did a really nice demonstration and explanation of using thinned Agrax Earthshade to provide stains on the interior, and realized I forgot to turn the camera on. So let me do it one more time. But basically, I'm just putting this stuff on like this, and because it's thinned with, and I just use water, it's very thin, and it will go on. It'll go on glossy, but it'll dry matte because I'm using the matte Agrax Earthshade, and it'll just be very transparent. And then I can go back in and use some additional colors to just suggest staining, because in any military vehicle you're going to have, if there's a hatch, which this would certainly have, rain may come in and it may get wet, and dirt would collect on that. You're going to spill coffee. You may spill some oil or something if you're putting oil in the thing. There may be, there may be blood or something like that. So there's a lot of different things that can happen. So just using some thinned, you can even use thinned paint, but just some stuff to suggest these stainings, and layering it up with different colors will really add to the depth of finish of the model. Now the way in and out of the vehicle is through the roof hatch. So I would assume that when they're climbing in and out, they're going to be stepping on this area here and this area here and maybe down into the seats and possibly even here. So what I'm going to do is use some of this wilder medium brown pigment, and I'm going to get just a little bit on this small makeup brush. I'm just going to deposit a little bit on there and just work that in to make it look like it gets dirty from people climbing in and out. There, I wiped away most of it, but it just gives a hint of dirt from people coming in and out. I'm not going to use a pigment fixer because since this will be inside, it's not going to be handled, it's not going to be touched. So I don't have to worry about the pigments coming off. And because I wiped them, most of them off, what's left is just kind of fairly permanent anyway. But if you were going to be doing something like this on the exterior of a model, you would probably want to consider using a pigment fixer. Now, I've got everything just about like I want it, but I do want to do a few oil stains on just a couple of the flat surfaces, very small oil stains. And I like using oils for this because you can blend them and get very fine streaks with much better control than you can get with an acrylic product. I've done streaking with acrylics, but my preference for this type is oils, and these are from from Wilder, and it's just a black-brown color. It's really just going to look dark. You won't see much brown to it in the small quantities that I'm going to be applying. I've got some oil on this little liner brush here. I'm just going to trace in a few streaks in places around the interior. Now I'm going to put on more oil than I need because I can go back and blend this in and reduce it if I need to. So if it's a little heavy, that's okay. And that's the beauty of oils, is the flexibility to put some on and remove it. Now instead of odorless thinner, I'm going to use some of this VMS Oil Expert. It's a substitute for odorless thinner that you can use with oils, and I think you can use it with enamels, but definitely with oils. And what it does is it speeds up their drying time, which is quite handy. But I'm just going to go in here and I'm just going to start working some of that away and blending that in. And the Oil Expert medium will dry up, so it won't leave that stain on it. But I just come in from either side of the oil stain with this fine brush here, and it's just a cheap liner brush. It's nothing special. And I just kind of blend that in and streak it down. And I can pull the oil down. I can get in the middle of it, do that, streak it down. You can push it back up towards it if you want to. It's very flexible, but you just keep working it off until you get it like you want. And I'm just occasionally going over to my palette and a piece of paper towel, and I'm just cleaning off the brush, getting some more of the Oil Expert, and you just work it until it's what you want. One thing I did forget to point out is this part here that forms the underside of the walker's head. This forward portion forms the floor for the cockpit. And what I did there was I just painted that with some German gray, and then I just sponged on some neutral gray to make it look like it was chipped. I didn't do anything else with it. Well, I think I'm going to call these parts finished, and you can see how they turned out. I like the look of that. It's not too busy. It's not too dull. I think it's just about right in the middle. And once assembled, I think it's going to look the part. So let me take a few minutes to snap it together. This is a snap fit kit, and one final look at it before I wrap up the video. All right, and you can see how that's going to look once assembled. I'm only holding it together because I need to do some photography with it disassembled. But once it's together, I'll set it up so that the roof will be able to come off, on and off, so that you'll be able to look inside of it and see what's going on there. But it looks, to me, it looks the part. It looks like a cockpit that is used in a combat vehicle. So I'm really happy with the way that turned out, and for being just a few parts in such a simple section, it's a lot of fun to paint and weather. Thank you so much for joining me for this video. I hope it's been beneficial to you and given you some ideas on a way that you could not only paint this ATST, but apply these same techniques to any interior. Much of what I've done here is very similar to what I did when I used to build aircraft and would build cockpits in aircraft. So this will work for the interior of just about any kind of vehicle you could think of. If you've not already done so, please click the subscribe button down over here on the bottom of the screen, and just click the little bell icon so you'll know when I have new videos coming out. I would greatly appreciate that, and I would also appreciate it if you would leave this video a like and drop a comment down below in the comment area, and just let me know you've watched this and maybe what you think of it, or what you're working on, or what your ideas for doing cockpits are. I always like hearing from people and hearing new ideas that I can incorporate into my work. There's also a link down below to Patreon, and there's also a button to support the channel through YouTube. So if you'd like to support the work that I do, please take a look at those. I would be most grateful. And if you're already a supporter, thank you so much for what you do for me and my family. It is a blessing, and we're thankful for every single one of you and appreciate it greatly. Now, with all that being said, I'll leave you with one final thought, as I always like to do. In this hobby, if you're not having fun, you're doing it wrong. Happy day to you, friends. Bye-bye.